Ahoy sailors, and welcome back to another edition of As We See It. It was finally time for us to lose our virginities again. We're going to be setting sail on Virgin Voyages' new cruise ship Scarlet Lady. The ship was supposed to have launched back in April 2020 in Miami, however that didn't happen due to the coronavirus, so they brought it over to the UK to do a Summer Soiree Series of 3-day and 4-day cruises. We are doing a back-to-back, so it's Friday, so let's start with our long weekender 3-day celebration. Come along and join us for some vitamin C as we set sail on Virgin Voyages and Scarlet Lady. We travelled down to the ship by train as we always do. The train from Waterloo to Portsmouth was uneventful and about an hour and a half. As we arrived at the station, we headed around to Galley Quays outlet as we were quite a bit early for our embarkation time. After about an hour of shopping, we got on a taxi outside the station and headed to the park and ride, which is where you do your luggage drop off and are shuttled by coach to the COVID testing centre across the road. As we arrived at the park and ride, our luggage was labelled up and it was put in a van to be taken to the port. We got on the coach shuttle and then it proceeded across to the testing centre. The first tent at the testing centre is where they check you in, check your passport and vaccination records, and Virgin Voyages were happy with either the paper card or the NHS app record online. After check-in, you're directed to another queue where you enter the second marquee. This is where they administer the COVID test. So Paul was called forward first for testing, and then myself a few moments later. It's a lateral flow test. After the test is done, you leave that tent. There are toilets in between tents 2 and 3 before you head into the final marquee, which is just lots of rows of people looking forward. They call out your name and you go forward. Paul was called out first and given our package with our wristbands we would use to open our room and also charge things to our account. About 5 minutes later, my name was then called. We were both given purple wristbands like the ones you get at events to say that testing was all done and cleared. We then boarded a shuttle which took us to the cruise terminal and a few steps closer to the ship. As we arrived at the terminal, it was obligatory to get your picture taken with the big Ahoy sign. Into the terminal building, check-in, which was pretty painless. Most had been done on the app. Our wristbands were activated. We were asked similar questions to what we'd already been asked or filled in online, which I'm sure is just a formality to see if you change your answers maybe. And we were free to head to have our bags sprayed before going through security. Security was cleared within a couple of minutes. The only snag about security was that you were ushered away from the scanner quite quickly and there was nowhere to put your tray, so you could gather your things up and put your belt back on and put your electronic devices back into your bag. Clearing security, you board your final shuttle which will take you across the working port to the ship. We walked up the gangway and we were finally on board. Process from testing centre to on board, I think took around about 1.5 hours.
Alright, hello there sailors, welcome aboard.
Hello!
Woohoo! Very good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good, now listen, your cabins are ready for you guys. So if you want to go and have a freshen up.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, drop some things off.
That sounds like a plan.
And then the bar is on 6 or 7, alright boys?
Superb, thank you so much.
Later.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We were advised that rooms were available for us, so we headed up to deck 14 to find a room, freshen up and drop off our backpacks. As we got near the room, we could see our suitcases in the corridor, which meant that we could unpack as well, which was awesome. For this trip, we're staying in an extra large sea terrace room. Virgin has renamed different spaces across the ship like they do, so balcony cabins are called sea terraces. You will get used to it very quickly.
Cruise. Ahoy, everybody! You better listen up and listen good. When you're on the sea, you better take it from me. You gotta know the safety rules. When you hear 7 short and 1 long pass from the ship's
After unpacking, we took some videos of the quarters and then headed out to find a cup of tea and something to eat. We popped up one deck to 15 to the Galley for some food. Now the Galley is not a buffet, but it has a similar style space. It has lots of places to have food with different choices. A lot of the benches have power points and charger devices, which is great. It does feel a bit like a food court at a festival with lots of different places serving different things. Now the food choices on this trip were limited, and this is due to being all arranged at the last minute and them not being able to source many local suppliers, as the ship is actually supposed to be sailing in the Caribbean and not the English Channel. We had food and wandered around the ship before we headed back to the room. It was time to freshen up, and it was time to then head out for dinner. My goodness, it didn't feel like 2 hours since we had last eaten food. Dinner this evening was an extra virgin, serving up a delicious infusion of Italian treats. Paul had booked dinner in the app for 6 PM prior to boarding because we weren't sure what our embarkation time would be at that point. We wanted to have an early dinner because the ship was due to set sail around 7 PM. We had seen great videos on YouTube, so we knew a few of the things that were on the menu, and I was hoping to try some of those, and we did indulge in some amazing food. Our waiting staff, Sammy and Laszlo, were absolutely excellent and really made it an experience. The only one thing they need to be a bit careful about is the ship is sailing at 50 to 65% capacity at the moment, and it was busy, and you were given more than 2 hours to dine. Now we saw this on another cruise line, and they had to implement a new rule regarding time spent in the restaurant. The venues are intimate and small, so a good 2 hours dining time would be sufficient for sure. After dinner, it was time to wander around the ship. We had a show booked prior to boarding, but we had received notification the evening before that the show had been cancelled. We sampled the nightlife on board and walked up on deck as we were still sailing away, so we watched Portsmouth head into the distance from the aft of the ship. We were a little late departing the port, but hey, we were sailing the Virgin Way, so what did you expect? It did start to get colder, so we thought it would be time to head back indoors. We walked around hoping the high street shops may have been open, but they were not going to be opening until the following morning. We headed back up to the Galley for a cup of tea before going back to the room. We were ready for bed. So we're going to bid you good night and we will see you tomorrow.